Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. You know, I was waiting all day in line yesterday, and I hate waiting in line. Stupid lady wouldn't pick a suspect. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Harrow County, the game of Gothic conflict from Off the Page Games. Harrow County, the game of Gothic conflict, is a game for 1 to 3 players. Now, the basic game is for 2 players, and that's really what I'm going to be looking at here primarily. Now, essentially, what happens is in a 2-player game, one of you will be the family, one of you will be the protectors, and you will gain a character from either the family or the protectors that you will play. You will set up the game board, which kind of looks like a Catan game board with the various hexes and different terrain types on the board. Now, on the protector side of the board, you will set up 3 buildings. On the family side of the board, you will set up 3 townsfolk. These are kind of the objectives that the other side is going to try to meet during the game. Now, players are also going to have a scoreboard, which is going to spot for their 4 jugs. More on that later. You're also going to have your character, and you're going to attach kind of a legendary ability to the bottom of that character, and that's something special that you'll be able to do during the course of the game. There'll also be a number of haunts in the game. These are kind of little characters that will accompany your major figure on the board that you can attack with and defend with, and they can do some other funky things. You'll also have kind of a combat area, a little kind of combat tray, which fits adjacent to the box itself, which has a combat tree in it, and more on that later. Now, on the board, there'll be various ability tokens. The family player will also have a bag with ability tokens in it. You'll each have your own kind of player board, which will kind of tell you how your tokens are going to be able to be played during the game. Now, as I say, there's a number of ability tokens that are on the game and going to be in the family's bag. And essentially, these things are advanced. You can play them to advance characters on the board. You can play the spawn token to actually bring on more haints on the board that you can then control. And then you have a strengthen ability, which will allow you to actually put more cubes in kind of your combat area. Now, you start with 3 of those cubes, and of course, the more cubes you have, the better off it's going to be for you during combat. Now, essentially, what you're trying to do is the family is trying to get its townsfolk to safety. They're trying to bring this townsfolk to their side of the board. And they're going to do this by creating kind of contiguous lines of their characters and haints or roadways which they can lay down to those characters. The family is trying to destroy the buildings on the other side of the board, and they do this by creating storms. As they move, they can create storms to destroy those buildings. Now, essentially, you are witches in this game. You're battling each other, and you have these kind of jars that have spells in them. And they allow you to do different things. You have on the scoreboard, you each have your 4 jars. You can each play 3 of them. You go back and forth playing 3 of them over the course of a round. Now, the first jar is the abilities jar. The abilities jar allows you to play those various abilities that I just mentioned. Now, the protectors, they essentially can put the abilities on their faction board, and the more they put out there, there's numbers associated with them with how much they can do those things. With the family, you're actually pulling those out of you're pulling that number that's on your board out of the bag. You can go ahead and then employ those over time. You can employ those to do those things that you need to do. Now, you also have the Wild Mason Jar. Now, you have kind of wild tokens that you will get through various ways. And when you play the wild token, you can play all of the wild tokens you've got that allow you essentially to do any of the token abilities. Now, you also have the Legend Mason Jar. Now, the Legend Mason Jar, as I say, allows you to do your legendary ability. As I say, for the protectors, one of the big things they can do is they can build paths. They can put these little path tokens, which means you can create with your haints and your character and these path tokens ways for the townsfolk to get out. If you're in their townsfolk and you have a kind of a direct line back to your base, they can go ahead and they can be saved that way, and you can gain a number of points for that. With the family, you can manipulate certain things on the board. You can kind of pull characters toward the storms and items toward the storms, and it's kind of a way to make it easier for you for the family to accomplish their objectives as well. Now you have levels with a legend with the legendary abilities. They can become more powerful over the course of the game. Now you have the attack jar. Now the attack jar, of course, you play the attack in order to attack your enemies. If you're adjacent, if your character or your haints are adjacent to another character or their haints, you can use that to attack them. Now, in order to attack, you have to have more strength, more cubes in your combat zone than your opponent. If you have more cubes, you can go ahead and attack them. What you're going to do is you're going to grab all of the cubes in the combat zone and you're going to put it down the combat tree. There's also some modifiers. Whoever has more strength is going to get an additional token for that, an additional cube for that. And there may be a few other things that occur at that time to influence combat. Now, essentially, you actually win if you have an equal number or greater number than the defender. And depending on whether you're attacking a character or a haint, you're going to be able to push him back or do some other pretty nasty things to him. Now, you're gaining points. Whenever you're successful attacking, you gain points. If you rescue a townsperson, you get points. If you destroy a building, you get points. And essentially, in the base game, you're trying to get, I think, to 7 points. First one to 7 points. But that's just the base game. Then you have kind of more advanced rules and more advanced game, and the rulebook kind of lays these out to teach you as you go along. Increasingly, you're going to be adding new characters, new abilities, and new cards are going to come into play as well. In addition to the points, you're also going to be looking at the spoon and tracking numbers with the spoon. So there's a lot of different things that actually go into a game, and it progresses. It gets more, like I say, there's a more advanced game where the rules kind of get progressively more complex. Now, if you do want to play a 3-player game, there is Hester. Hester is kind of this old witch that was killed long ago. You can add Hester in there to make this asymmetric game even more asymmetrical. And then you also too have the expansion, the Harrow County expansion, which allows you to actually make this a 4-player game as well. But whichever player is able to get the most points within their scenario wins. Harrow County, the game of Gothic horror. We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review. All right, so there's a lot more to this game than I'm discussing here. I'm just, again, giving you the barest overview. We've gone ahead and we played this game, Ray and I, and it's a very abstract game in a lot of ways. I mean, you do have the theme of the these kind of magicians or witches, like I say, battling with these jars, and the artwork here is phenomenal. I'm in love with the artwork here. It's kind of a board where you're going from terrain to terrain types, and okay, and I can do this here and I can do this here. So the theme, I think, it comes through in the artwork, but in gameplay, less so. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an observation. I don't think it's one of the more thematic horror games I played at the end of the day. Some of the cards introduce stuff like that into the game, but again, I didn't feel like it was, for me, as thematic as perhaps I thought it might be. So there's that aspect. The game is asymmetrical. Now, this is something I really enjoy. I do like good asymmetrical games where different players have different powers, they have different objectives. I think asymmetrical games can be very fun, and they're among some of my favorite games. Star Wars Rebellion, for instance, Dune War for Arrakis, right? I do like a good asymmetrical game. This game has, when I say it's kind of abstract, one thing I mean by that too is this very much to me felt like a chess match. A little more thematic than chess, granted, but it did feel like chess in a way, an asymmetrical game of chess to be sure. but it was like, you're moving your haints here and your fellow here, and you're trying to accomplish your thing, but then you can kind of see the other person making their play, and okay, how can I throw a monkey wrench in that? And you're looking at the board kind of like a chessboard. At least that's the way it felt to me, right? With the terrain sometimes, giving, like, I think from a mountain you can attack two spaces away, right? Whereas normally it's just adjacent. So there's some different things that go on there, and then certainly terrain matters, like with the legendary ability of the family, right? So there's a lot of little things like here you got to kind of keep in your head, like in a chess game, which I thought was pretty fun and pretty engaging. It's a pretty tight little game. I enjoyed it. I have not yet played a 3-player, and I have not yet played a 4-player. Like I say, we do have the expansion. Perhaps at some time I'll hit that. Maybe I'll get a chance to give you my thoughts on that in time. But for right now, I think this is a pretty fun game. I think it's a good. It's the artwork in it, like I say, is good, and it's creepy. And for that, I think it's a good kind of Halloween game to play, even though, as I say, it does play a little more abstract. And some of the card abilities and stuff, as I say, in the more advanced games, when they come into it, you do get more of a theme there. I enjoyed Harrow County. I thought it was a fun game. Maybe not my favorite, most thematic horror game, but certainly enjoyable. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to give this a 7 on the Cody scale. I think if you like a real good, crunchy, thinky game that almost plays like an abstract, that is certainly asymmetrical, but still does have a little bit of that Halloweeny horror theme to it, you might enjoy this one quite a bit. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, I'd ask you to please give a thumb to this video on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and please leave a thumb for this video on Board Game Geek as well. If you like what we do here, please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, military history, books on history, those sorts of things. I even put up some of my lectures on that channel. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to that channel. And if you do really enjoy the stuff we do here, I would humbly ask you to click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. If a cop pulls over a U-Haul, did he bust a move? Somebody